loan from a friend. Do you ask to borrow funds? No, money. So using like everyday words to tell your story. Cliches are another common form of journalese in government stories. Journalists love to use words related to heat and cold, heated debate, hotly contested, blasted, chilling effect, cooling off period. Use short, simple sentences. The more complex the information, the simpler and shorter the sentences should be. Use vigorous verbs. Whenever possible, replace to be verbs and other bland verbs with words that help to paint a picture of the activity you are reporting. Avoid starting sentences with there. The word there forces you to use a weak to be verb, such as is, are, was, or were. If you look at this example, there was sadness expressed among local people gathered Thursday night. Weak, what would be stronger? Local people expressed sadness as they gathered Thursday night. Interpret information, tell readers how they are affected, translate jargon, explain terms and concepts or comparisons that the reader can understand. Vary the pace, avoid writing huge blocks of complicated concepts and complex sentences. Follow long sentences and long paragraphs with a short sentence. Focus on a person to explain the impact. Use an impact lead or explain impact in the story to tell how the reader will be affected by bureaucratic action or proposal. Avoid boring quotes. You don't have to quote an official to prove you talked to him. If you can express the official's point better in your own words, do so. Use the pull quote test. Are your quotes strong enough to be broken out as pull quotes? That's one way of testing whether they are worth using in a story. And pull quotes, of course, are if you're reading an article, maybe it's a larger print version of a quote that somebody said, usually in the middle of the article, sort of, it breaks up the eye, it keeps you interested. Use conversational style. Write the story as if you were having a conversation with a friend. Use lists. Use them in the middle or at the end of the story, especially to explain key points of an issue. Be selective. Use only quotes and facts that you need. Use the blocking technique. So if you have more than 3 speakers, block the comments from each one, and then do not use the sources again unless you reintroduce them. The reader can't remember all the officials by second reference only. I do the same thing even if I have 2 speakers. I like to have one person say one thing, one person say the other thing, and then I end my story. I don't like to have person A, then person B, then person A, then person B. It gets a little confusing. Read aloud. If you read all or parts of your story aloud, you will catch the cumbersome phrases. Government affects people's lives, but too many stories just parrot news releases or report coverage of meetings. If you don't help readers and viewers understand how the information affects them, chances are that they won't read or watch the information you are trying to convey. With social media such as blogs, Twitter, Facebook, and others, you can reach far more people and engage them in issues that concern them. You can also use social media sites to follow blogs or Twitter sites of politicians, government agencies, and citizens who are interested in community issues. Many of the federal government agencies post information on social media sites, including the US Census Bureau, which is a treasure trove of statistical information. Statistical stories use analogies whenever you are referring to large numbers, comparisons with something familiar to readers. Something familiar to readers are especially helpful. Round off numbers, 3.5 million instead of 3,499,590, right? Make things easy. Avoid bunching numbers in one paragraph. Spread numbers out over a few paragraphs. And interpret numbers. Show the impact on readers in terms they can understand. Use storytelling techniques. Even statistical stories can lend themselves to storytelling. Budget stories. They're hard to write and even harder to read if you flood them with lots of numbers. And in broadcast stories, numbers are worse to hear. You can't avoid using numbers in all stories, but don't put several numbers in the same sentence or paragraph. Whenever you are writing about numbers, you must analyze what they mean. Most reports list numbers in comparison to a previous year or time frame. Always put numbers in perspective in two ways: explain the change and state the significance. Consider these basic questions: who, what, when, where, why. Budget and tax terms. Writing techniques. And that's chapter 19. Chapter 20 is crime and punishment. Some coaching tips. One second. Avoid the jargon of police or other legal authorities. If you don't understand a term, chances are the reader may not know it either. It will sneak up on you. Even I have reporters who they will send me a story. There's something in the story, and I ask them, "What does this mean?" And they're not entirely sure. And I tell them, "Well, if you don't know what it means, then it shouldn't go in the story. Make sure you know what everything means before you put it in the story." Always include the background of the case, double check your story for accuracy, and make sure that you don't convict someone of a crime before a judge or jury does. Edna Buchanan, good quote from Edna: "The police beat is all about people, what makes them tick, what makes them become heroes or homicidal maniacs. It has it all: greed, sex, violence, comedy, and tragedy." Crime stories goes into records, attribution, newspaper or television archives, guidelines for reporting crime stories. Here are the basic questions to ask and the basic information to include in crime stories. Stories about specific types of crimes: motor vehicle accidents, fires, court stories, criminal and civil cases, federal courts and state courts, criminal court process, and terms used in court reporting. So a lot of different terms on here. If you're not familiar, go through them all. Read them, because I think there's a lot of very helpful stuff in here. And if you are covering the courts in any way, these terms come up, and it's good to know what they mean. Court story examples. So that's chapter 20. And chapter 21 is disasters, weather, and tragedy. Some coaching tips: seek human interest stories and anecdotes. Check social media on Twitter, Facebook, blogs, and other citizen journalism accounts. Get information to reconstruct a chronology of events. Use descriptive and narrative techniques. Double check all information. Initial reports and statistics will change quickly. Plan highlights boxes and empowerment boxes to provide survival tips. All stuff that comes up, and it happens every year. So we had a bad snowstorm in April here in the Binghamton area. And almost half of the residents in the entire county of Broome County were without power at some point. It was a big deal. It was kind of like a live blog where we had an article that we started, and we just continually updated it throughout the day with more information. And so to be a part of that and doing that in real time, it's just nonstop. It's always changing. One of the things that we're doing now with another live blog we're doing is we're saying, okay, this is our story on May 3rd at 10 a.m. Then above it, we're going to have our story from May